BCE now we say. But these are, the round things are homes that they would put like round, roofs on. But these were communities that lived, these are communities that started to settle down in those early years. And so you have these kinds of ruins that go back 2,000-3,000 years. And people, there's not, you can climb around on them, there's nobody taking tickets or selling anything. It's just like, have fun, everything. They say, in Spain, it's everybody's property.
The beaches are all public, and I don't know how many thousands of miles of beaches there are, but it's this beautiful, gorgeous, unexplored, rugged coastline. It's just heaven.
We don't know that person. But
I don't know the person on the cliff, but Marlin and a friend of ours is hiking down there.
And
the Atlantic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the Atlantic. Mm-hmm. And then Santiago de Compostela. This is the end of the Camino de Santiago. Some of you, I think, walked on that with Anitra at some point. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah, the picture coming, it wasn't an amazing picture, but I just wanted you to see, this is how you walk into the town square with the cathedral. So you see a few people with backpacks in the background. You see the bagpipes. That's that Celtic tradition coming in there. So he's playing. You come walking through that area after you've hiked, some people, the whole thing, which is 500 miles. And you'll see that on the side, there's a pilgrim eating with his backpack, and there's a menu. There's always a pilgrim's menu. That's a good deal and a huge meal. You can go in. And then that's the square that you walk right into, and that's actually not the cathedral, but that's across from the cathedral, but you can see all the groups and stuff. And I walked it twice, and once ending up in there, and I was totally unprepared for the fact that when we got there this time, just showing it to my family, the emotion just welled up in me again of what it felt like to just be there and experience that amazing experience. So I have crammed a few slides into the vertical thing, so forgive me on that. But these are 3 separate slides, and you want to tell them about that special line?
This is a special holy door that's only opened, on certain, very, very rarely, only in certain years, and supposedly, if you walk through this door, there's this absolution of all your sins. And so the holy door is sealed from the inside. I took some notes about this, and how only in Jubilee years, so it'll be open. So on every 7 years, and so they, this idea, the Pope. So one of the Jubilee years was 2021, but because of the pandemic, they allowed it to stay open into 2022. So there was a special dispensation from the Archbishop and the Pope and all that to allow that to happen.
We thought we might as well try, see what happens.
Yeah. So anyway, it was quite wonderful to see that was open. And then there's
the center slide is actually a hotel that's in that square.
It's the oldest hotel in the world, or something like that. They tried to tell us, but this is
it's one of the main entrances.
Yeah, one of the main entrances. So there's an entrance
to the cathedral.
Yeah, there's an entrance. Is this the entrance with the woman on it? Do
yes,
we have a picture of her?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all the sins. All the sins are depicted on this. So that the idea is that you go in with your sins, and then you come out on the other side, and there's angels and all that on the other side. But this woman on the right, you see, she has that skull on her lap. Well, the story is that she committed adultery. She was married, so her husband cut off the head of her lover, and then she had to carry around his head for the rest of her life. That was her penance, and she had to kiss his stinky skull twice a day, and so that's the story, and so it's to be a warning against adultery.
And I mean, you look at these, you could look at any of these many myriad of details, and there's so many stories in there. So it was fun. We had a tour with a friend of a friend who kind of knew some of these inside stories, so that was fun. And then on the far right there, that's St. James, who these Camino is named after the pilgrim. And supposedly his bones are interred in the cathedral. There's a whole lot of mythology around that. And these are just some street scenes in the town of Santiago. There was an accordion player and people dancing. Okay, and now we've left Spain. So we'll be back, but this is, as I said, when we were staying in the place in the village, we were just an hour and a half from Portugal. So when we wanted to go to the beach one day, we said, let's just go to Portugal and go to the beach. So this is, our friend Sarah had come to join us at the very end, and she's a surfer. And so she decided to teach Lila and Marlin how to surf. And that was the one day that Lila actually enjoyed the beach. It was super foggy, though, so I love these pictures, the kids playing soccer down below, and then at the end, the fog kind of wore off. But I also love these guys over here. This is a very European thing. You see the old men and just everybody kind of sitting around, talking, just being super relaxed. And we probably have, I don't know, 25 or 30 pictures of this scene because it never gets old. And each different time of day and different light was just gorgeous. But this is our saying goodbye to the village, either sunset or sunrise. And now we are heading off to Portugal. This is, you can...
Braga is a beautiful, it's like the third largest city in Portugal. And this is a pilgrimage site where people, if you really want to go for it, you're supposed to walk up these like 831 steps on your knees, but we didn't do that. And you could just see it's real pretty, just beautiful mosaic and lots of statuary. And then there's fountains. You can see this one with coming out the eyes, but they have, as you walk up, each different landing has a different statue, and there's water coming out of every orifice because apparently we can sin out of every orifice of our body. So it's for purification of all those different areas. You can we didn't take pictures. She did take pictures of all of them, but this is the place we stayed. Just an Airbnb. So a lot of places we would just, we'd either go on like bookings.com or something like that and find a place to stay in Morocco or Portugal, or we did some Airbnb also while we were there. So we just kind of looked online and found places to stay.
This was beautiful, right in the center of everything. And the problem was the pigeons.
This is in Porto.
Yeah.
This is in Porto. So we'll show you some pictures
spent
now
3 days
of
there.
Porto, which is the second largest city. It's like the Tulsa of Portugal, as opposed to the Oklahoma City, which is Lisbon.
Porto was stunning, and usually each place we'd go to, I'd have maybe, 300 and 400 pictures. Porto, I have like 875. It just was so picturesque and gorgeous.
So it's actually Porto on this side of the river, and the Douro Valley. That's the Douro River and the Douro Valley, where port wine comes from, on the other side. And so you'll see some nice scenes of
the doors. I have a million pictures of cats, and I have a million pictures of doors.
But we're not all in this slideshow.
No. I've saved you from that.
Just giving you a little sense of the street and some of the graffiti, and just obviously some homeless folks there, is like anywhere that you go, and the pigeons and
the seagulls
right?
and the pigeons, yeah.
And just kind of some street scenes. And then this is a really great story. This is called the São Bento. This is a train station. And in this train station, there's like over 100,000 painted azuelo tiles, which is a big part of the tradition in Portugal. And so they sell, along the top you have the history of transportation all the way around the top. And then you have these famous scenes, huge scenes, but it looks like a big painting, but each one of those are small tiles, like regular, smaller than these tiles, each one painted and then put together. And there's like 100,000 in a train station. So it's just unexpected place to go in, and you're like, this is better than any museum I could have gone to. Yes. I think they're called azuelo. Oh, please, yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jump in at any point and help us with that. That's great.
Yeah, Portuguese is not an easy language at all.
One thing I like that the people in Portugal, they said to us, like, we don't expect, there aren't that many people who speak Portuguese around the world, so we don't expect tourists to come here and know our language. So they were really accommodating to try to speak English or French or whatever language people had. And so there was just a great invitation to tourists. You know, some countries where you feel, I know I have felt if I didn't speak the language, a little bit of, you know, that there would be a little resistance or something. But in Portugal, there was just a sense of, no, we don't expect you to know how to speak our language, please.
But they didn't really like it when you spoke Spanish, and we were so used to trying to speak Spanish.
That's true.
That when I would mess up, and yeah.
They said they'd rather us speak English than speak, especially bad Spanish, you know, like we were.
But tell them the tiles.
So the other thing that's interesting, there's a whole history of the revolutions in this country, political revolutions that displaced the church. So there was a point in the late 1800s, like 1893, if you know the year, you could correct me, but somewhere around there, that where they had a revolution, and they said the leader of the political leader said there will be no more monks and nuns anymore in this country. We will not pay for or allow any more monks or nuns.
That's a different slide.
Oh, that's a different slide?
I was wanting you to tell them just about the tiles being painted because they
ahead.
weren't literate, most of the population, and so the stories were told in the paintings on the tiles. That's all I was wanting you to say.
Great.
The monks one is this next. It's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
So
keep going,
sorry.
keep going. It's related to
These
that,
are
but we'll
just
come back.
city scenes. Beautiful, incredible, elaborate church here. The inside was
Baroque,
insane.
kind of a Baroque era church.
Here it is.
Okay, so so I was telling you the story about the ending of the monks and the nuns, but they realized that in their culture they couldn't just say to the nun, they could send the men back to go work and go, you know, you're no longer a monk, you got to go work or have a family or do whatever, but they didn't feel they could do that for the women, for the nuns. Like, they were nuns, they weren't married, they were like, we can't just send them out. So they allowed the nuns to stay in the nunneries until they were over. So this was the last of the
It's a monastery.
a monastery that had women in it, you know, until the last one finally died. But actually, I was telling the story at the São Bento station because that was also a monastery.
Sorry.
And they were waiting and waiting and waiting for the last. It actually where they wanted the train station to be was a monastery, and they were waiting and waiting, decade after decade, and then finally, kind of like King Charles had been waiting for his mom to maybe pass away, but just waiting and waiting, and she wasn't dying, so they built that São Bento, that beautiful train station, while they were waiting for finally this nun to die.
I'm sorry.
It took like 100 years.
I got our monastery things confused. Okay.
Is there any story you want to tell?
No, just a shopkeeper on the left. He was a woodworker. It was amazing. And just some of the street scenes again.
And then this is...
Those guys serenaded us for lunch one day. That was beautiful.
That's right. And then lots of beautiful street
Amazing
art.
street art. But this picture I love that one of Lila because that was her attitude. When she stood next to that drawing, I was like, okay, yeah, I got to take that picture.
But I have pictures of her like that next to beautiful churches, and she's just like wants to look at her phone. So, let's see. And then, yeah, they were jumping off this bridge. That's, I guess, a famous thing. They had to wait because you saw those big boats and ships, so they kind of had to wait for a moment. It's totally illegal, but nobody got arrested for it. And then you got your little story you wanted to tell.
Oh, the guy, I was there waiting to take the picture, and the guy said, I'm jumping for my father. And then someone in the crowd said, what about your mother?
Just more scenes of Porto. It's really just this gorgeous city built on these, these hills along.
It was super hilly. Our legs got some good working out when we were there, for sure. That's our one port tasting that we did over on the other side of the river.
So Porto wine is fortified wine, so they add some extra spirits to it, like some people say brandy or something a little stronger, and it stops the fermentation process, and so it helped with some of the shipping of, what we were told was it helped with some of the shipping of the wine and the storage of the wine, but also became really popular in England when the French cut them off from French wine during one of their conflicts. And so the British came in and started to buy a lot of port wine. And so that's how there's the strong connection between Britain and port wine is through this relationship with Porto and the relationship
I
with the
didn't know
French.
before coming here that it came in all those colors. I always thought it was just the deep red, but it actually has a whole variety. Okay, so this is an amazing place. If you go to Porto, you have to check this out. This is a prison that has been turned into a photography museum. And it's got a crazy story. So I wrote some things down here for you. First, I'll just show you. Inside, the exhibit were incredible. The downstairs part of it has the exhibits in it. That's where the paupers used to be imprisoned. And then as you go up into the upper flights, the upper stories, that's where the wealthy and the women would be imprisoned. The views of the city were outrageous. I'm like, wow, I guess it probably was not so nice being in the prison, but the views were nice. Anyway, up in the upper part of this building, they had a history of photography exhibit with these cameras. And these things on the bottom are cameras. They're spy cameras, each one of them. The Camel cigarette packet, the Marlboro. So that
They
was...
had Pepsi can cameras and all these ones during the Cold War that were used. But they had every kind of camera from the beginning of photography all the way through today.
It was a great place to visit. So they also had a history of the museum itself. And so the picture up here is a prisoner. This is just a picture of one of the exhibits that was happening of a wonderful artist that did a lot of those double exposures. And then outside the museum is this statue. So the story behind the statue is crazy. The guy in the statue is a famous novelist, Camilo Castelo Blanco. Anyway, 19th century writer. He really had a thing for women. And actually our guide told us that it wasn't when the nuns that he ended up being with or the 13-year-old girl that he was with, it was finally this wealthy businessman's wife that he starts to be with, and then finally he gets caught and in prison for adultery. They put them in prison together so they get to stay in their nice view looking out. Sounds pretty good to me. He was locked up for a year, but during that he wrote in 2 weeks his most famous novel called, I'm not going to try to pronounce it in Portuguese, but it translates to Love of Perdition. Anyway, he's kind of a doomed character and ended up committing suicide at the end of his life, but that is the story of one of the famous prisoners of the...
So they have this statue outside the prison of these two.
That's him and his lover. Oh, the lover, Ana, I have her name, Ana Placido. They ended up marrying afterwards, and she was also a writer.
All right. So is this also the jail?
No, that's just another street scene. And now we've left Porto and we're on our way back to Spain. You won't see more pictures of Spain, but this is a beautiful seaside, small Portuguese town, and some of that I really loved as well. So Porto had its own gorgeousness, but these small towns were just amazing.
The suspended umbrellas.
Just, a fun little square scene. I don't know, nothing. They were just decoration. Yeah.
As far as we know.
Yeah.
Well,
All right, and now are
we in Morocco now?
We flew
Okay,
into Tangier,
nice.
left Spain after 3 weeks, and off to a new adventure. So the markets were amazing. The picture on the bottom right are olives, if you can't tell, but I love olives, and oh my gosh, they were so good there. So again, these are 3 different pictures. It's a lot going on here. You got a shopkeeper, you got the market with the meats, and you have the women. And I will say, women did not care to be photographed. I mostly could only get the backs of them or other people, not women. But that's why I ended up turning my camera to the cats. I decided I'm going to try to tell the story of this area through these street cats, because supposedly there are as many cats as there are people in Morocco. So I didn't put a lot into this slideshow. They're going to be in some of my stuff that I have over there. But beautiful textiles. Everybody wants to sell you a rug. We kind of had to learn over time, like you need a guide to help you through these areas often, because you can get lost in these ancient parts of the cities called the Medinas. They have these winding alleyways, and they go on forever, and if you don't know where you're going, it's a little challenging. So if you have a guide that is trusted, that's what you need. But sometimes the guides also have these connections to shops, and so they'll want to take you to their, shop that they have somebody, and they're going to sit you down and get you the tea and the whole thing. But then if you buy something from them, you're getting the markup of what everybody's going to get. The guide's going to get a piece of that and whatever. So we kind of learned to not tell our guides, no, we don't want to go shopping. We can look, and then we'll come back later. But that's just Tangier's right on the ocean, so.
That's a fortress that's sort of at the top of the Medina. The Medina is like an ancient part of the cities. We found them in all the cities in Morocco, and they're like a labyrinth. These streets. Usually you can't get cars into the streets, and people have been living in these areas for centuries, and they still live in very similar ways. And it was just quite amazing, these places. We'll see some pictures. And you could see this goat in the stairwell. That's just, we're leading up to a little story about that. We weren't sure why we were seeing goats
in people's
homes, in the back of people's vans, on the back of people's motorcycles. But everywhere, when we got there, everybody had a goat or a sheep, it seemed like, that they were wrestling, into their house. And we're like, what is going on? We had no idea why this was happening. We're like, this is different. But it all comes, we learn why in a little while. So
as I said, like hundreds of pictures of doorways and hundreds of pictures of cats. You'll see a few here. They're just
beautiful tile
stunning
work as well. I know the influence in Portugal too, I think, came from the Moors. And other Muslims who came into that part of Portugal and Spain, Andalusia and Spain, and the south of Spain. Onions.
Okay, this is actually on the road traveling from Tangier on our way to Chefchaouen up in the mountains, and it must have been onion season, because every roadside place just was packed with onions. And I think the bags filled with the greenery, that's the greenery for the goats.
Yeah.
And so everyone who brings their goats into their home at this certain special time of year also have to feed them. So there was a lot of this stuff around. So Chefchaouen
is called the Blue City. It's referred to. And
yeah,
they think there's lots of different lore of why it's blue, and nobody can tell you for sure. Everything from they believe it keeps away the mosquitoes, to it was the Jewish quarter originally that was painted blue, and then eventually the whole town started to paint their homes blue. And then now, even though nobody can remember why, they just keep doing it. And now it's brought in a lot of tourists, so now it's just really well known and famous for the homes being blue.
It's quite beautiful. I think at different times of year, it gets so kind of crowded with photographers and people trying to get their Instagram pictures that it can be a little bit intense. But we did happen to be there during kind of a hot season, and so it wasn't crowded at all. It was really nice, actually. So you see the goats hanging out with the people on the streets, and their food is right there.
In their homes. Yeah, we rented a car. That's how we traveled by car. And so this was the summertime, so this was July.
Yeah.
It was very hot. So
we
stayed pretty much in the mountains and in the north and along the coast. we didn't go down into the deserts of Morocco, which are supposed to be incredible.
And we didn't go into Marrakesh because it was just going to be way too hot. But what was fun with renting a car was with COVID, you know, we didn't have to deal with being in public transportation. But I will say traveling between the cities was fine. But when you got into the city, oh my God, it was, luckily Marlin drove the whole time, and our marriage survived. me navigating, and like, you know, he said it was like a video game with soccer ball on the left, donkey cart on the right, and, you know, just these narrow little streets. It was insane. It was so nail-biting stressful. I actually kissed the ground when we handed in our rental car at the end.
But I would say, though, I didn't appreciate fully until a little ways along that I'm driving, so I'm in control, but the person in the passenger seat is just like at the mercy of whatever. So that is a lot more stressful.
It was. Thank you for that.
So these are
Just keep going, yeah. These are just street scenes of the beautiful, beautiful area. Look at that, what he's carrying on his, some henna.
And that's the Berber people are the indigenous people of this area, and so that's the hat is a traditional Berber hat, and that's the woman who's doing the henna.
And we were in the town square, and we're eating lunch, and so she had her henna, and then there's a funeral going by, and then the call to prayer comes, and the people are coming up into the mosque.
It was beautiful. They were singing, you know, walking through the streets with the body and singing, and it was really beautiful. The traditions, the Muslim traditions, were really beautiful. And then 5 times a day, the call to prayer coming from every mosque. You know, they'll sing, chant the Arabic words of the Quran, and it's just beautiful every time.
We actually got used to pausing and doing our own little introspective prayer during those times sometimes.
Yeah, we just decided to use that as a moment to kind of pray. There were some things going on with people back home, some members of the church who let us know things were happening, so we just said, okay, we're going to stop and pray for them whenever we hear the call to prayer.
I have to say, I love the men's outfits. Look at the guy with the striped top. That is so cool. Marlin did end up getting a couple of them, too. And people thought that he was Moroccan. A lot of the people in Morocco look a lot like him. Their skin ranges in different colors, from pretty pale to more darker brown, but almost everyone, when he was wearing the outfit, would say he looked just like one of them.
Until I opened my mouth, and then some woodworkers, some cats. You see, they're selling this greenery. We didn't know why they were selling that either. Like, we're like, what is that? But that's for feeding the sheep and the goats that everybody seemed to be.
And the things next to the cat are dyes for used for painting.
This is a bread oven, a wood-fired oven for the bread. What is that, soap or
Those
something?
are soaps.
And then,
It always smelled good. So you see the Berber woman getting her stuff for the goats and the little kids. I think around this time is when we finally figured out that we were there for a very special time.
Yeah, Eid al-Adha, which is the most holy holiday in Islam. And Aliyah, you're going to correct me if I make any mistakes, but because I always thought it was Ramadan, but this is actually considered holier than Ramadan. And every family that can afford a sheep or a goat is supposed to purchase one and sacrifice it on a particular day, which is it's in commemoration of, if you know the Bible stories of Abraham. So in the Jewish and Christian Bibles or scriptures, it's Abraham's son Isaac, who, if you remember, Abraham takes him. God says, take your son, your only son, and sacrifice him on Mount Horeb. So Abraham, of course, didn't consult with his wife, because Sarah would have never let that happen. But he took his son and said, hey, let's go take a hike. We're going to go do some sacrifice up on the mountain. And then when they got there, Abraham starts tying his son up to the wood, and he's about to kill him. And then God says, wait, no, don't kill your son. Jeez, okay, you've proven that you're faithful. Take this ram. And so then a ram came out of the thicket and said, and sacrifice that instead. So for Unitarians, for those, we think of that as the beginning of fundamentalism, because anybody who would listen to God to kill their own child seems incredibly extreme, because he was like ready to do it. And I was like, if you hear the voice of God telling you to kill somebody, really talk to your wife, talk to somebody else before you act on that voice. That would be something we would say, at least here. So anyway, to take the story full circle, in Islam, one of the reasons that the Quran, it's understood that the Quran was dictated by God to Muhammad, who was illiterate, so that it wasn't his writing, it wasn't his words, it was the word of God through him. He was a vessel through which the word of God came into the world, as Islam explains it. And so a lot of it is correcting the record that was somehow mistranslated or otherwise corrupted in both the Torah of the Jews and the Bible of Christians. And so one of the stories that gets corrected is this story about Abraham and the sacrifice. So to just back up one step, Abraham had, before Sarah was pregnant with Isaac, she couldn't get pregnant. She was like 90 years old. And she finally said, you know what, go ahead, have sexual relations with our maidservant Hagar and have a child, because I know, God said be fruitful and multiply, and that your offspring will be given all the milk and honey and blessings of the world, but I can't give you any children. So he did. So he sleeps with Hagar, has a baby named Ishmael. Well, after Ishmael's born, Sarah, this is now according to the Torah, the Jewish scripture in the Bible, that Sarah got jealous of Hagar and Ishmael, so she sent them off into the desert. And the understanding is that they became the Arab people, which became the Muslim people. That was his first son. Then Sarah got pregnant at 90, so just know that. And remember that abortion's no longer legal in Oklahoma, so if you get pregnant tonight, those of you who are over 80 or 90, just know that you'll have to have the child. And Isaac means to laugh, because even Sarah laughed when she realized she was pregnant. But the thing is that in the Quran, the story is that, and if you think about it, in the Torah it says, Abraham, take your son, your only son, and sacrifice him on Mount Horeb. So as the Arab people, and in the Quran, it says, well, the only time he had only one son was when Ishmael was born. By the time Isaac was the firstborn. Oh, okay. There you go. There you go. Even more. Right. There you go. Yes.
After she was banished into the desert. And so when you see all the Muslims that go to the Hajj, don't go to Saudi Arabia. That's where she was banished. That's Muslims go to the Hajj in Saudi Arabia, and they do we reenact essentially what Hagar did in the desert while she was there. And at the end of the 2 weeks of that commemoration, that's where the sacrifice comes in. Where Abraham was brought out of the thicket, instead of sacrificing Ishmael, God says to sacrifice the ram, and that's where the story of the sacrifice comes in.
Thank you. I'm so glad you came tonight. No, that's great. I might need your help a little bit later as well, but this is really great. So we're all learning even more. So thank you. I really appreciate that, because I don't want to teach anything that's not correct. So in Islam, the holiest holiday is this Eid al-Adha, when males are are supposed to, well, any family that has the money to afford a sheep or a goat is to sacrifice one to commemorate Abraham's, this sacrifice and this moment in history when God, and God gave this blessings through his son. So that is, but just keep in mind that this is the Abraham, the founder of Judaism and Islam and Christianity, I guess, for that matter. But you can imagine, we know about all the tensions between Muslims and Jews historically and currently, and just know that this is a pretty core issue right here about who is the firstborn son, who does the blessings go through, who owns the land. All these questions are all tied up in a lot of theology and scripture. So it's gonna. I'm giving you the story. You're gonna see more in just a moment. But we do. There are. Do you know when we're gonna come to that?
I'll give a.
She's gonna give a trigger warning before you see any. They do. They eat every bit of the animal, and they use every bit of the animal.
They cook a portion of it for themselves.
And then they give away.
Is to be given to those that are less fortunate.
Yeah.
That's right.
They're not able to afford it.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. So it's both given away to those who are poor or who can't afford it, but everything else is eaten. I mean, it's their sacrifice. Also, it's like the Jewish sacrifice for kosher meats, so that it's done in the most, or I should say, the least painful, the most humane way of killing, and then they use every bit of the animal. So I mean, even though it's a sacrifice and it sounds sort of barbaric or something, it's actually anyone who eats meat, this is a pretty sane and humane way to kill an animal. All right, so it's a long time on that one slide, but
This is the bread from that region, was always in that shape.
you
It's delicious.
dip in the most wonderful
my gosh,
tangine
yeah.
meals, which are just delicious, with everything from lamb and apricots and figs and prunes and just raisins and nuts, and just amazing. And then some more of the kids in the Blue City, and then this is right outside, right?
This is just
up above.
You're in the Medina, and you look out and you see that, and that mountain. I wish I had the other picture where the mountain goes way up. So. Here are some of your kitties. The white one on the bottom has one blue eye, one yellow eye. I don't know if you can see that, but just a little side note, I have books of street cats of Morocco, and they're for sale tonight. And then on the 19th, 20th, when the All Souls will do its art fair, I will have note cards and calendars as well.
So you can see these folks who are, trying to coax these animals through the streets, city streets and different things. And so, some are trying to entice them with food. Others are just pushing and pulling. And it was just the funniest scenes, people of all ages and just trying to get these animals into their homes or into their cars or whatever it was.
Okay, so from here on, there's a few slides we're going to show you of a sacrifice. We ended up being invited into a home. That's another whole story on its own of how we got that invitation, but I'll give you one clue, it had to do with our 13-year-old daughter flirting with a 17-year-old boy, and then him inviting us over to his family. So these are just some goats that, a lot of people have these little rooftop terraces, and so that's where a lot of the goats and stuff would stay. And so if you're squeamish, you might want to look away for some of these. I try not to show too much, but it's hard to not show much when this whole thing.
Lila almost fainted when she was there.
We'll tell that story. So here we're in their home. This was the cute boy who was flirting with my daughter. Look at the look on Lila's face. Oh my gosh. And the mint tea, the father, he's pouring us the mint tea. They always do it with this long thing. And then the breakfast was delicious.
So on this day, the men all go to the mosque in the morning, and I think the women are usually preparing breakfast, a big breakfast and everything. So it's this big holiday. And then the men come home from the mosque, and everybody eats together. And then the king of Morocco does his sacrifice. And once he's sacrificed his sheep, then everybody else is then free to or
And
by
all the
custom.
stores were closed. We were told, get some peanut butter and jelly and some bread because you're not going to be able to eat or go to restaurants or anything. So luckily we got invited over. Their living room was amazing. Look
On
at
the
that.
right.
This is they're so family centered that that's just all for family to sit and commune and be together. And their floor is all tile. And then the very small little kitchen. I'm not sure, they may have had another kitchen in the
Well, there was actually
because
three
there were all these different floors.
There was 3 floors and 3 different families. I mean, they were different sons who had their own families, but they all lived in this one, building. And so this was just one of the kitchens on the floor that we were on the top, where the terrace was, where the
Yeah.
sacrifice happened. So then this is the goat. They actually had 4 sons, so they had 4. They had a sheep and 3 goats. And so this was one of the goats, and they're holding it down, and then they slice the neck so that's the fastest way that it will die. But then, the blood gets everywhere, and
just
so you
clean
got to
it up as they go.
squeegee it, on that bottom right. They're just sort of squeegeeing it down a drain.
And this was when we were all standing out on the terrace when this happened, and Lila did almost pass out and ended up having to go down. That was a little rough.
It was quite a scene. There's the head.
But the other kids in the family, they were just kind of watching the whole thing happen, like, sitting around like they're watching a movie or something, or just curious.
I mean, I wouldn't know how to skin and do all this stuff, but pretty much most men in Morocco, and I don't know how many of the other cultures. Aliyah, do Muslims in the United States or North America do this? Yeah.
So here in Tulsa, we have some individuals, we have some land out, the ISD has some land out in Big T, and so they'll go out there. But most of us here, like what we'll do is we'll send money over to Syria or any of the other countries who are more poverty stricken. And so we'll say, sacrifice 10 sheep
Oh,
or
right.
calf or whatever,
Right.
to distribute all that. So
Nice.
we don't do any of that here.
Nice.
Right.
The family stuff to it.
Nice.
That's great.
They'll just have it done elsewhere for those in need.
Right.
So that's what we do. But I will say every year I end up getting at least 2 or 3 calls from JTTF.
Who's that?
Because the Joint Terrorism Task Force.
Uh-huh.
I liaise.
All right.
And so they'll get calls. There's a bunch of terrorists out here sacrificing.
Oh, gosh.
They're about to blow up the city. So
Right.
we get those calls.
Wow. So.
Yeah, you gotta love it.
Yeah, so that if you don't have one of these terraces, if you're not wealthy enough to have a home with a terrace, then you just do it right on the street or in front of your house or on the sidewalk. So you'll see some scenes of just some, basically the Blue City ran red by the end of that day because there was blood running through the streets everywhere.
They're supposed to, just like kosher.
Yeah.
With the bihar or halal, which if you hear that halal.
Halal, right.
The bihar actually is the term equivalent to kosher. That animal is supposed to be drained almost completely.
Completely of
Yeah.
blood,
Yeah,
right,
it's supposed to be completely drained.
right,
You're able to butcher the rest of it and prepare.
right, there you go.
The organs are the first to go bad, so they eat them first or do stuff with them. But the liver was the prized thing to eat. And I've never had fresh goat liver before, but I did that day. They barbecued it, so it was cooked, but it was just nothing added to it, nothing. It was actually quite incredible.
So
I was very impressed with the insides coming out there. And I will also say the other thing I felt impressed by is just the intimacy that they have with the animals and with the food. And I feel like in our culture we're so far removed from all of that. And I think probably they would think that's strange if they came here, and lots of people, if they go there, think that is strange. But I actually found it to be pretty profound that they had that intimacy with their food.
The thing about the liver was that we were actually leaving Chef Shawan that day, so we had to get out of our hotel, and we had a time when we needed to be out of this place we were staying. So this was taking a long time. Like it took a long time to get the skin off, and then all of a sudden you're starting to take out the different organs, and I'm like, how long is this going to take? So I said to our host, I said, hey, we're going to need to get going. And he said, whoa, wait. he said, wait till we eat the liver. After we eat the liver, you can have some, and then you can go. So we're like, okay, so we waited, and then we had some liver, and then we could politely leave without offending anybody. And they were wonderful. The family was
They
incredible.
were great. And I love the two little girls in the stairwell watching their little videos, just like they do here. But yeah, this is walking down the street on our way back to the
Yeah, you
hotel.
can see just, the street, there's stairs, and there's just blood coming down, and blood coming, this is somebody squeegeing it out from their front porch area onto the street. So, I mean, there's literally blood everywhere, and but it's a holiday, and everybody's having a good time, and they're smiling and, having fun. So it's just, it was hot. It was hot. And so that was part of why Lila was ready to pass out. Yeah, it was, I mean.
It had a goaty, sheepy smell.
And then they take the head and they burn because you can't really skin the head, so they burn all the fur off of the head, and then they're able to that's a delicacy in and of itself, the head.
So this is an overview of Chef Schoen as we're leaving, and we're heading now through the countryside, absolutely stunning, on our way to Fez. When we arrived in Fez, oh my God, this was where we stayed. This was amazing. I think it was equivalent of $60 a night or something, and that doesn't even show you half of this place.
Oh, and they fed us, and I mean, it was amazing.
And this was inside the ancient Medina, so the next, we were also near the tanneries, so all the skins get
This is
hides.
the day after the sacrifice, so all the hides, people, you can't sell the hide. You can't sell you can't sort of make money off a sacrificed animal, so people give the hides away to others, and then they give them all to the tannery. So outside the tannery, you just see all these pelts just lined up, and that did smell by the next day. And stuff.
But they clean the streets very quickly, actually, and that was just the only time we saw that. But then if you see that alleyway over to the right, how narrow that is, I mean, you can just reach your hands out and touch, and you have a little story about the,
we talked about the Medinas, right? There are these labyrinthine, areas where this is in Fez, Morocco, it's the largest square footage of civilized, land where people live that has no cars. It's over 8 kilometers square where there's absolutely no cars, but you have
9,000 alleyways to get lost in.
9,000 alleyways where you could get lost, like that one and like these. And you do see, horses coming through and donkey carts and people wheeling carts. But I mean, this is a whole 90,000 plus people living in this area. And they're really tall buildings, so the sun, it stays cool on the streets because the sun doesn't come through. But you can just tell it's amazing, these Medinas, if you ever get a chance to go and be there. And you have shops and people selling rugs and people baking and people's homes. And I mean, it's just just a mix, and it's just incredible.
You can see the sign. Once you learn to read, not to read that language, but read some of the signs, you can figure out some of the main roads, and that helps a lot. But you have the Arabic, and you have the Berber, and the French, is it?
Yeah, but it's French, but the Berber is the indigenous language, but they didn't have a script until recently. This is a new, like end of the 20th or even 21st century that they've developed the script for the Berber language.
And for those of you going to Fez anytime soon, we need to hook you up with our tour guide. He was awesome. Right there, he's showing us the pitchfork, the 3 things on the door. That means it's a Berber, or was a Berber home.
So there was, I can't remember what all the 3 were, but you could see whether it was a
They
Berber
were
home.
agrarian, so that's why the pitchfork.
Right.
And then there was the Jewish and Muslim.
Right. So there was a Jewish home would have like a 6-pointed, the 6-pointed star somehow, and then the Muslim home had, I think it might be the moon and the star. I can't remember. But you could tell whose home, what the religion of the people in the homes were. No. We paid him to give
Our
us a tour
hotel
of Fez.
hooked us up with him. He
For
was
about
great.
4 hours, half a day, 4-6 hours, something like that. Some people do that. They travel with a tour guide across the country. But but the people we met who were doing that, they weren't really happy a lot of times with their tour guide because they didn't know they knew a lot about one area or a couple areas, but they didn't know as much as the local guide in any particular area. So we enjoyed just getting a guide wherever we were. So in this, imagine Fez with 90,000 people all living in this 8 square kilometer area. Every section has its own fountain like this. They're not all like this. This is a really nice one.
Well, they're beautiful,
but
though.
they have their own fountain, their own mosque, and then their own, certain other kind of amenities that they need. But every section within there has a fountain where people can get water if they don't have running water in their homes.
And the little window box up above
So-
is so the women can look out without being seen, but they can see who's down below and who's ringing.
They can drop the key and then the person can come in. But that way, yeah, they without being seen. Then this is the tannery. So this is where they dye, where they soften and dye the leather. And they've been doing it like this for, in this same place for hundreds of years. Beautiful, soft, wonderful. I mean, there's different grades, different types of leather, but it was quite amazing. And then this is actually the Jewish quarter in Fez, outside of the Medina. Jewish people came through and were merchants a lot of times and did other things. We went to a synagogue there. I don't know if there's pictures of that there.
Yeah.
But what our guide explained to us was, if you notice, these are balconies that face outside. In all the Muslim homes, the balconies were inside with a courtyard. And so you have different people, like the women would wait for their husbands to come home from work, or their children, or they'd be doing different things, but internally, all inside the house in Morocco. Whereas the Jewish people who lived there, their wives would wait on the balcony for their husbands to come, the caravans to come through, or for their husbands to come back. So he said, if you ever see the balcony on the outside of a home in Morocco, that's a Jewish home, and if it's and obviously indoors for Muslim. So this is
The storks.
yeah, lots of storks there, cool. Some of the guys. This is the synagogue that's still in Fez. There's Muslims who are paid to kind of keep it up. There's not a Jewish community to speak of there anymore.
And the baths, there's really gorgeous baths around that we didn't really partake in because it was so hot.
That was the other thing: a fountain, a mosque, and a bathhouse.
Yes.
This is like a high-end kind of more for tourists and bathhouse. This is not the typical bathhouse. These are the dyes, the different. Oh no, spices. These are spices.
Those are spices, and that's the city gates. So there's always different gates that would lead you into the Medinas. And that's Fez from an overview.
So that's like the Medina from above.
Just part of it, though.
Yeah, that's just a
It's just
small
so huge.
section. And then go ahead.
I'm sorry. And we did a little kind of luxurious escape up to this little town, only about a half hour from Fez, up in the mountains. It was gorgeous. It was cool. There was a pool. This is just a little outdoor area to lounge around in, but look at how beautiful that was. The food was amazing. Everything was amazing.
For us,
there.
it was a nice respite after being, in the Medinas and driving and being in the city a lot. And it was
the
hot,
city
so this was
streets
just
and
nice and cool, and you could just kind of lay out. And
our
look
rental
at the view.
car getting up the
Our
hill to
rental car
get there was a
barely
little
yeah.
the little engine that could.
So then this is a little town that we heard of called Balil. That's actually why we ended up going
Right.
into these mountains and how we found that other place. But this was where our destination, which is this town has people who live in cave homes that have been living there before this Medina that you're looking at was even built. These folks lived in the cave, in the rocks and the soil underneath. And then they built the Medina above these people's homes, but they still live, hundreds of them still live in their cave homes. So this, you could see, like these are doorways into some of those cave homes, and you can see structures sort of built above them. So that blue one is another one. And then this was our guide. So we found a guide, a Berber man who took us. He said, yeah, he knew some people who had cave homes and stuff, that he could get us in to see some people. So he was wonderful, spoke great English.
They had a little town square where the women were washing the clothes. And then they had a local communal bakery. So you'd just bring your dough or your vegetables or your meats there, and he would, it was so fun watching him. He didn't really want his picture taken, so I had to kind of be sly, but those poles, just throwing them in and out from the oven there, and then you can
huge.
see the women on the side walking with their breads that they've just
So
cooked.
some people don't have ovens, or it's just so hot in the summer to be able to use your oven. So it was a real communal place where people came. So then this is inside a home. You can see the roof is the rock that's just painted. These folks were just really lovely.
So the women in this village have one job, that all the women in this village make these silk buttons that are used on those. Oh yeah, I have some of them on here. They're like little knots, they look like, but they're very elaborately made and beautiful, and they're made supposedly out of silk that comes from cactus. And they showed us how they did it, and we got to, observe them making one. They got to show Lila how they made it. We got some tea. They were lovely. They had a daughter there that had the henna.
You see him pouring the tea. That's like the big. Everybody they pour the tea and like raising it up, and the higher you can raise it without spilling it. He was pretty impressive.
And there's not really much alcohol at all in Morocco, but the mint tea is called the Moroccan whiskey. And it was wonderful. We fell in love with the mint tea there. Delicious.
There's Lila.
So Lila got to try her hand on making one of the buttons. It was not easy. And they dressed her in this beautiful thing just to show it off, but I felt bad for her because it was so hot. But she wore it graciously, and I love that picture of her and that little girl that Marlin took. That was my favorite picture. And then they had other caves outside of the town as well that we got to visit.
Those are the original sort of cave homes that the people lived in.
Oh, right.
2,000 years ago in that area. Then we came into the big city, the capital
This
of
is
Rabat.
Rabat, yeah.
And so you start seeing some really modern buildings. And I'll tell you a story that we asked our guide back in Fez, who lived in the Medina his whole life, and all the generations of his family. And so we asked him, do you know a good restaurant to go to? And he recommended a place, but he said, we don't go to, he goes, if we go to a restaurant, we don't go to eat Moroccan food. If we're going to eat Moroccan food, we eat it at home. Our mom would be offended if we went out to eat Moroccan. She'd be like, what's wrong with my tangine? You're going to go out and pay for it. So he said, so if we go out to dinner, we go outside the Medina, we go to Pizza Hut. He's like, for us, that's like a night out. Like, it's something different. So we thought that was great.
So we're back on the coast here in Rabat. That's the scene kind of up from the viewing. It looks like that's the fort. I'm not sure where we were. We're at someplace. Yeah,
we did.
Now we're in Casablanca.
This is our last city.
This is where we flew out from, and this is our view from our Airbnb. Was this like that window, and then there was a wedding happening and a rooftop just near us, so that music was blaring into our place. It was really cool, and then you could see that mosque at night. So that's the Hassan II mosque, and it's one of the largest mosques in Africa. Absolutely stunning. You'll see some pictures of that in a little bit. But since we hadn't done a ton of shopping because we were lugging our luggage everywhere, and so finally in Casablanca being our last stop, we did allow ourselves to go and do some shopping and get some gifts for people. So had a little bit more modern Medina, which was interesting. I love the eggs in the back of the motorcycle piled high there. And then here are the mosque. I again probably have quite a lot of pictures of that.
You usually can't go into the mosques and visit them, but this mosque, they do allow tourists to go in.
That just shows you a taste of the opulence and the beauty. It was really, really incredible.
The roof actually opens up because it's so hot. You have 25,000 people in there that can worship at the same time. That's 25,000 men and I think 10,000 women. And so the roof actually opens and closes, this giant roof. They said they got some German engineers to help them figure that out.
And this downstairs are the baths. So people come in and they've been traveling. They've been.
Well, you have to purify yourself first
you
before
have to go
worship,
in,
before praying.
So they have a women's section
But it's,
and
I
a
mean,
men's
this is
section.
huge. It's like underneath, and
It's
it's
gigantic.
just gigantic.
And that's the rug we purchased. We looked through a lot to find that one.
Oh my God, these guys pulled rugs down, and we're like, nah, I don't know, that's not the right color, it's not gonna match. And then they're like pulling rugs, and we had a great time with them, laughing and just having fun.
I love this shopkeeper over here. So this is actually the end of our slideshow. I added another picture because, like I said, I have so many of that village. I had to show you another one.
So, but maybe there's some questions or anything. We've got a few minutes, but if you have a question, Anitra, would you bring the microphone, because there are people on Zoom and they can't hear, and I realized they didn't hear some of the great stuff that Aaliyah shared with us.
How did you contact guides or find a guide?
So mainly through wherever we were staying. So I'll tell you, we stayed both in some Airbnbs and then a lot of places that, like, we found on bookings.com. They have these different kinds of places, a lot of really interesting. We didn't stay in any Hyatt hotels or anything like that. But so we found that when we were in a place like a hotel of some kind of small hotel, there were people there who could find us guides. They could give us recommendations for restaurants. They were sort of responsible for us in a way. It was nice. When we chose an Airbnb, we had to find it ourselves. We had to, like, figure out the check-in. We had nobody to kind of, like, help us find anything. So we actually would, if we did it again, we wouldn't do Airbnb. We might do a couple, but we would more stay in places.
We used this, which was great, the Lonely Planet guide, and I love using that as well
Yes.
as just
Yeah.
online research.
Yeah, so just a guidebook, and we rented a car. As a matter of fact, we were in Spain, and we spent an afternoon booking hotels for Morocco, because when we were there, we didn't even have a plan yet for Morocco until we got to Spain. And because, I'm busy when I'm home here in Tulsa, so it wasn't until, like, I was on sabbatical where I could actually pull out the guidebook and make some phone calls, get online, and book some rooms. So that's how we did it. Pretty.
I was just wondering if you found the Moroccans as
Speak
open to
in the
tourists.
microphone if you would.
Yeah, did you find the Moroccans, like the Portuguese, real open to speaking English and
yeah.
open to you all as tourists?
Very much so. Very open, very friendly. I mean, hospitality is a key aspect of Islam. And, they say that Abraham, at least in the Muslim world, they say that Abraham's tent was open on all four sides, so that no matter what direction you were coming from, you felt like you were coming in the front door. Mm-hmm. So hospitality is a really important quality of.
I never felt scared or worried in any of the places that we were as well.
At any point there, did you have any kind of air conditioning, or we're so used to that here? Did you find it anywhere?
Thank God,
Yes.
yes. Some of it was better than others, and one place they had advertised it as air conditioning, and it was only one unit in the bedroom. One bedroom.
That was one of the
That was the worst of
Airbnb.
all, but other than that.
No, yeah,
it
we had
was-
great. We every place had air conditioning that we stayed. Yeah. Please. Give her the microphone.
Of air conditioning either. So it's in many European countries.
Oh, right.
I mean, the UK, when they had this heat wave over
Right.
the summer, the reason people felt really hot is they didn't have air conditioning. So
Right.
we have a tendency, I think, to assume that other Western European countries are just like us.
Right.
But they're not. The air
Right.
conditioning isn't in France.
right.
It isn't in Portugal.
That's right.
Actually, too, but the walls were so thick. The walls in Spain, and I mean the walls in the house that we stayed in were probably 12 inches thick. So that really helps with keeping in the coolness and blocking out the heat and all that.
So we have about 10 more minutes. If you need to go, obviously, you can go. But we have about 10 more minutes. If you have other questions, we're happy to answer any more questions. Well, thank you all for coming, letting us relive the experience. It was always so fun.
Thank you so much. So fun.
We recommend.
If
we
you get a
recommend all
chance to
three
go,
places.
yeah, I recommend it.